So I did my review of Terminator Genisys, which I really thoroughly enjoyed as a fan of the entirety of the franchise and being a sci-fi, very imaginative time travel fan. One of the things I'm hearing most often about Terminator Genisys is that it's too confusing. These are the same kinds of complaints I always hear with the Transformers films, where there's action, these huge action set pieces, and nobody knows what's going on. It's too frenetic, it's too fast paced. You can't tell where anything is. I've never had this problem. I don't know if this is something that is attuned to the passion I have for these properties, where I can watch those live action Transformers films and I always understand what's going on. I always know what's going on. Same thing with this Terminator Genisys film. I didn't have any problem following it, and the timeline, all of that stuff was clear in my mind, and I think it still would have been even if I weren't somebody who was a fan of the entirety of the franchise, including the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which this movie has a lot of the timey-wiminess that you see depicted in that series. So I have to say, like, when I see people reviewing Terminator Genisys and they keep saying, oh, it was convoluted, it was too confusing, it was all these kinds of things. Is it just my nature as a science fiction time travel fan that makes it more accessible to me? Is it because I'm more invested in it? More so than these average just moviegoers and such like that, these movie reviewers. I'm not exactly sure, but I really do strongly take issue with anyone who comes off of these movies and say it's too confusing, it's hard to follow, the time travel doesn't make sense. Everything made perfect pitch sense to me in the experience of watching that film, and I can't wrap my head, whereas these people are saying they can't wrap their head around the film itself. I can't wrap my head around how they can't or think they can't wrap their heads around it. I don't know, again, if that's just because of the kind of fan of the Terminator franchise I am. Time travel movies, I love the aesthetic of time travel in science fiction, all that kind of stuff, whether it be in film and stories. My favorite book and film of all time are The Time Machine, the book, of course, by H.G. Wells, and the Time Machine film by George Powell. I also like the remake, and I have a passion for time travel in science fiction, Back to the Future, Time After Time, all these kinds of different things. Planet of the Apes somewhat has time travel, that franchise, or at least the first film in it, first couple, really. Actually, if you want to get technical, first three all involve time travel, and as well as evolution and all these kinds of things, evolutionary spurts, and, space travel as well, and whatever like that, human displacement from the norm. But I mean, I don't comprehend how these films, Terminator Genisys in particular, is too hard to follow. I can't grasp that. I almost want to say it's like a simpleton nature. Like, how are you missing out? It's pretty plainly stated throughout the course of the film. If you're paying attention, I think that might be one of the large problems, because of its overabundance of action in the summer blockbuster fare framework. Maybe people are thinking, well, I can turn my brain off, but then they leave and they're like, well, I didn't get it. I don't understand what the fuck was going on today, because of that wrong impression, that you have to leave your brain outside. I think you need to be following along and paying attention a little bit, not, to a gross degree where, unless you're nitpicking every little dialogue bubble or whatever, you're going to miss out on the story. I think it was plain stated. I mean, to me, I don't know, it's just my frustration that the biggest sort of qualms I hear about this film, and I can kind of semi-see where people are coming from with some of the, actors cast in the piece maybe not living up to the original actors and everything like that. But I still think everyone who was in the film, as I said in my review talking about it, was spot on, was perfect. I enjoyed them all for what they were. And, but again, coming back to the most common denominator in people's having an issue with the film, that I hear time and time and time again. Now that I've seen it, I've been looking at reviews everywhere. And for these so-called critics and film reviewers, too convoluted, didn't make sense, too much confusing time travel stuff. And I didn't get that one iota. I don't understand where people are coming from with that. And I don't know if that's just a me thing, the way my mind works, the way my fandom is for these films and time travel in general, or if it's actually a legitimate thing where the layperson just doesn't get it. I don't know. Most of these people who are putting these thoughts forth are noted film, viewers and lovers and movie buffs and everything like that. And you would think that they would be more opportune than, say, the layperson, the mass populace, who would be going and spending their money to just, have an experience at the theater once or 2-3 times during the year for summer blockbusters and such. You would think these people would be more attuned to the story, and then they're coming on and they're being like, well, I don't know, it was too confusing, man. I couldn't follow it. I didn't understand what's going on. Well, you busted my mind. You completely blew my brain. Because how you could not understand it is frickin' just beyond me.